two pieces of Cowboy-esque news yesterday. One, Zeke Elliott is back. He's signing with the New England Patriots, and Zack Martin is back with his Cowboys after getting the deal done between the two sides. 21 days he was absent, and now Zack Martin will be back in California. The man who helped break some of the financial news is Michael Gehlken, Cowboy insider from the Dallas Morning News. Michael, good morning. Thank you for joining us. How did this thing finally get done?
Good morning. Thanks for having me. I think it ultimately came down to both sides recognizing that, they were better off with this resolution coming and being willing to find some sort of common ground where if the Cowboys wanted to be really, rigid with this whole situation, they would have said, you know what, you signed a 6-year extension. This is year 5 of it. You got to honor what you put on paper, and we're not going to do anything that begins to reflect that you're the best, interior offensive lineman, probably best offensive lineman in the NFL today, and you being $7 million underpaid is just what it's going to be. We don't want to see any precedent otherwise. You signed the contract, we're done. They could have done that. Likewise, Zack Martin could have said, I am the best offensive lineman in the NFL. I am, again, $7 million underpaid relative to Chris Lindstrom, relative to Quentin Nelson. And so make me whole all the way, make me the highest paid, interior offensive lineman. Ultimately, if that's what both sides wanted, neither got what they wanted, which is you have a pay raise that, doesn't put Zack Martin as the highest paid guard or the second highest paid guard, but it still, is a reflection of, you were, underpaid and you were a real bargain. You're just, less of one now. You're still a bargain. So I think for the Cowboys, they still feel like they're okay here. They did enough to make they're arguably their best offensive player, happy and in camp, which is important. But they also didn't do anything that sacrifices their future as it relates to, paying some of these other guys, including CeeDee Lamb, Dak Prescott, and obviously that's a big contract on the defensive side of the ball, Micah Parsons.
There was a lot of tough talk, Michael, from the Cowboys on and off the record, it felt like, on this topic over the last month. So there's some talk now that people are like, look, this is another negotiation that they lost. Look, they lose out. Ultimately, was that posturing, and do you think this ends up around where the Cowboys probably always expected they were going to have to pay?
I wonder what the Cowboys' expectation was for how this thing was going to end. I got to think that, maybe with these $50,000 fines that there was, daily, that there was a hope that, incrementally Zack Martin would get to a point where he would just show up. But I think it became pretty clear, over the course of, a 3-week wait that, no, his heels are pretty well, dug on this one. And, and the gap of, where he was currently paid to where he ought to pay really was widening, considering, you remove about $1 million from, already $7 million deficit relative to market value. And so the longer Zack Martin waited and the closer we got to the season, I think the more some of his leverage came to play, because ultimately the Cowboys believe they have something here with this roster. And you could easily argue that, and I would, that this is the most talented roster that Zack Martin's been a part of since he arrived in Dallas in 2014. And so to squander the what Martin means to that offense, to that run game, everything that the Cowboys want to be in terms of their identity this season, to squander that over a few $1 million, I think it was just very reasonable that the Cowboys would budge and be like, okay, well, we're not going to do nothing. Clearly, you are not coming back for with an action. So let's find some sort of common ground here, where ultimately we're both a little bit unhappy. But that's kind of the hallmark of a quality deal, is if both sides feel like they got a little bit of what they wanted, but not exactly all of what they wanted.
Michael Gehlken, Dallas Morning News, with Zack Martin returning to the Cowboys here on 105.3 The Fan. Saw that you caught up with someone Bobby knows pretty well, and Duke Manyweather. It looks like he's been working out with Zack. What has Zack Martin been doing in order to stay ready?
Staying busy. That's the one thing about Zack Martin, where anyone in the Cowboys organization that you speak to over the past few weeks, none of them had any doubt that Zack Martin, when it came time for him to report, whenever that would be, he'd be ready physically and mentally. Like, the guy is just so locked in. I wrote a story on him a few years ago, and I was kind of wanted to understand just kind of what makes him great. Not a whole lot is written about Zack Martin in general, which I think is a testament to his consistency. And he's kind of just he'll be the first to tell you kind of a boring. There was no like great adversity he overcame in his life. He just kind of goes about his job. But the one thing that people, from a football side and also a personal side, his inner circle will tell you about Zack Martin. He's just so consistent, and that's something that Duke Manyweather talked about, was just the consistent approach, the diligence, the wanting to be the best version of himself. And he took what Duke Manyweather had to give. And obviously Manyweather is, I don't know if there's a more respected guy in the NFL community who's not, maybe directly in the NFL community than Duke Manyweather. The way that so many offensive linemen come to him in the off season, come to him to kind of pick his brain, and the way he brings them all together for the Masterminds event each July there in Frisco, it's pretty remarkable. So Zack Martin took advantage of one heck of a resource locally to prepare. We actually were scheduled for an upper body workout in about 50 minutes. Obviously, Zack Martin's not going to be there for it. He'll Oxnard and all that awaits. Nonetheless, Manyweather's work with Martin was instrumental to kind of help make sure that he stayed on track and is ready now for camp.
Do you know Zach's practice schedule out there in California when he's stepping on the field day one for him?
Sorry, say it one more time.
Do you know when Zach is actually going to practice in Oxnard?
I don't think there probably is a long way for that. There's going to be, I imagine, a bit of a ramp-up period, so I doubt you'll see him, stay on the field today for team period. But individuals, I imagine that will start pretty soon. But his exact travel schedule, I'm not sure. So I don't know when he got in. But I imagine it won't be long. I wouldn't be surprised to see him on the field very, very soon.
We're talking with Michael Gehlken from the Dallas Morning News. Michael, the other big Cowboys-related news yesterday was Ezekiel Elliott now has a team. He signs with the New England Patriots. We kept hearing Jerry and Steven sort of leave this door cracked open a little bit about a potential return. How much do you think that was really a conversation or a thought for them versus just, deference and respect to somebody that they thought really highly of?
Yeah, I think the one thing I remember about where Ezekiel Elliott was mentally when the season ended last year was there was no place he wanted to be other than Dallas Cowboys. What Dak Prescott means to him, what this locker room means to him, what this organization means to him, all that had him envisioning being nowhere but Dallas. And so I think if the Cowboys were really serious about having Elliott here, he would be here. And being serious includes a financial offer that reflects that interest. And I just don't think they ever showed him one. Now we have him in New England, and we'll see him October 1st when the Patriots come to AT&T Stadium. And the Cowboys are really set now to, if there was any doubt, move forward with a really, really young running back room. Rico Dowdle obviously had the fumble the other day, but I thought it was explosive. And he has 7 career NFL carries. Malik Davis going into his second year. And obviously Deuce Vaughn, who I think everyone who saw that game would be impressed by. It's a young group behind Tony Pollard, young and inexperienced, but with Elliott off the board, I think everyone can kind of move on. And something we talked about in the past where, I think even if the Cowboys aren't serious about a player who is something of an icon, someone of an attention getter in terms of, fans, talk about this guy, media talk about this guy, talking about an Ezekiel Elliott, talking about an Odell Beckham Jr., they put a lot out there public to insinuate interest when I think behind the scenes, if there was as much interest as it kind of let on publicly, the deal would have gotten done. In the meantime, it leaves a lot of people to speculate. It leaves a lot of people to talk about it. And that's, again, more people talking about the Dallas Cowboys, which seems to be good for business. You
mentioned Deuce Vaughn there. How much of a role do you think is realistic to expect him? I think everybody feels like he's on the 53 at this point. How realistic is it, do you think, that he's going to have a role within the offense every game?
I think it still needs to be a bit resolved, where I look back at every single snap he played, and, that there's a lot to like. But we didn't get to see him be asked to really do much of anything in pass pro. On special teams, he was out there for a little bit, but there wasn't a whole lot to make any determination. I think Kavontae Turpin, where does he fit on this 53 is a real question. And ultimately, I think Rico Dowdle probably did more on Saturday than Malik Davis did, but some of that, it's just really too early to make any grand determinations and conclusions because it's still, 1/3 of the preseason done. So I think Deuce Vaughn, though, you look at him and it's hard to imagine, I guess, if you feel comfortable about what he can do on special teams, then he's active, and you've got to get him involved in offense based on what he's shown thus far. So he clearly has the Cowboys' attention. They're very excited about him, and I think if the season was starting today, I would say, not only is he on the 53-man roster, but he's active on game day, and he's probably seen a smattering of touches on offense because he looks that good.
Michael Gehlken, Dallas Morning News on the Cowboys here on 105.3 The Fan. So your main feature on camp for the longest time was Micah Parsons. You said this is the number one story in California. Can you take our listeners inside that feature and why you believe number 11 is the number one training camp story?
I think if Micah Parsons wanted to kind of coast by, or let's just say give the status quo type of effort that an NFL player does, he would have a terrific annual Pro Bowl and even annual All-Pro type of career, potentially, be a Hall of Fame type of guy. Like, he's that talented, and his starting point with his athleticism, his hand usage, his contact balance, all the other things that have made him, has him already as an elite NFL player. But he's done more this year where he's decided to be truly great and put in the work to achieve that. I remember speaking to his brother in Oxnard, and he's like, I haven't seen Micah this focused. And he talked to other people who have been around Micah Parsons this offseason, and he's just dialed it up in a way where it's just a mentality for greatness. And so when you have a guy who is putting in the extra work and not, being afraid to reach out to Andrew Whitworth and not being afraid to work with a local boxing coach, and Mark Cooper was actually the one who introduced him to that boxing coach. But then Micah Parsons takes it on his own to schedule these individualized workouts, and by the time training camp comes around, he's doing 6 3-minute rounds, which tells you about his conditioning. Also tells you about his dedication to be more violent with his hands, which is something that you really feel in Oxnard. Is he's more violent with his hands. So he should be better against the run. Obviously, against the pass, he's already locked in, but he has a better sense for what offensive linemen are trying to do against him. So he's a smarter player than he was 3 years ago when he entered this league. Just he's elevating this entire team, and the defense is what's going to be carrying this team ultimately. But with Micah Parsons elevating everyone else with the way he's elevated himself, to me that is the story of camp. It's not trash talk. It's not the occasional Dak Prescott interception that gets overblown on social media. It's his defense in year 3 of Dan Quinn, year 3 of Micah Parsons, and Parsons' decision to be great.
Last minute here, Michael, just a quick question for you. We've already seen deal get done for Diggs. They worked something out with Zack Martin. Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb, Terrence Steele, do you think anything gets done with those guys before the season?
The Cowboys like to keep it quiet before a deal gets done, and things can kind of move quickly, which I think the Zack Martin situation showed. You'd like to think, if you're the Cowboys, that another one of those dominoes falls. I wouldn't bet against it, but as to which one and as to when, I would only be speculating. But, yeah, the Cowboys definitely would love to get another thing done here before week 1.
Man, a guest who listened to the 1-minute warning. Someone who actually did it. Jared Sandler could learn a lot from you. Michael Gehlken, Dallas Morning News. Thank you so much for the time, man. Keep up the great work.
Thanks, guys. Have a good one.